As in all war zones, we wanted to establish exactly what was happening in terms of abuses by both sides, by the rebels in eastern Libya as well as by Gaddafi forces. We had a pretty good idea of what had been happening in Libya. And one of the recurring stories that we heard about was about this execution which had happened in the eastern city of Benghazi all the way back in 1984, where a show trial had taken place and then a group of men had been hung in public. There was a man named Idris who used to come to our hotel every day. He was a very successful businessman in the city of Benghazi. And he had a packet of prints, black and white prints. I was with a photographer called Tim Hetherington, who later died in Misrata 2 weeks later. And we realized that they were prints of Gaddafi that had been used for various propaganda reasons. And he said that he had gone into the headquarters of one of the security services while the building was being ransacked and being burned, and had removed as much as possible documents and videos and negatives and prints. What he had come to show us was just a tiny fragment of what he had collected. But then we also came across a group of videotapes which actually were at a different house. They were held by the brother of one of the guys who was executed. And we went to the house of Ibrahim. He said that since the revolution, different people had come to him and said, "We recorded your brother's execution." And he said, "Please take this, get it digitized somewhere so I can watch it on my computer. I just want to make sure that they end up in the right hands and that I get them back, because I've never seen the videotape of my brother being executed." This is the audience. A lot of them were children. It's at a basketball stadium. And they were school children who were told to come attend this hearing, but they didn't know what was going to happen. They're just clapping and shouting revolutionary slogans.
Sadiq Hamed Shwehdi.
See, this is the guy who's on trial. This is just the most powerful image of the whole archive, is this young student sitting in this sports stadium all by himself, being questioned by this revolutionary court. And he knows he's going to die. I mean, they just hung the other guy. This is the image of fear. And this is the guy whose brother I met in Benghazi, who gave us the videotape.
اسمي صادق حامد شويهدي. انضميت كنت ندرس في أمريكا.
He's talking about his travels to America to study engineering and who he met in America, how he became involved with people in opposition to Gaddafi.
انضميت لكلاب الضالة في أمريكا في سنة 81.
They can show this at university courses if people want to know what a forced confession looks like. See the woman who just stood up here in the green? This is Huda, the executioner, trying to get the crowd more excited. She's right here in the middle. Really enjoying herself. She was a minister in Gaddafi's government, and she was a minister of sports and youth. And she fled Benghazi during the revolution. Her house was completely burned. It's one of the first things the protesters went to do, is to destroy her house. And she's now in Tripoli. So now they're reading out the sentence. They're sentencing him to death.
بقصد البدء في الأعمال الإرهابية السابق الإشارة إليها التي أقرها المؤتمر بالإعدام شنقا حتى الموت.
في الميدان في الميدان.
Right in the stadium, in front of all these children. They hung him live on television. And then they went back to the news and they had more confessions. And it's a moment that just about every Libyan you speak to can vividly remember. This is all the film, and you can see what kind of condition. Some of these haven't even been opened yet. I mean, there's two aims. One is for us to analyze it for any evidence of human rights abuses, but then we also want to help preserve it for the Libyan people. The archive we found has materials from many different eras. For example, this picture is a picture of King Idris, the last king of Libya before Gaddafi carried out his coup, arriving in Benghazi. And what's interesting to note in the picture is the flags, because these are the flags which the revolution in eastern Libya has now adopted as the flag for the new Libya. And this is one of the first pictures of Gaddafi arriving in Benghazi. Obviously a very different era from what was to become of the Gaddafi era. There's Gaddafi. This is Minister Yunus, former defense minister, now with the rebels. These show a very important meeting between Gaddafi and President Nasser of Egypt. Nasser was the hero of Gaddafi, seen as kind of the guiding light of Arab nationalism, and Gaddafi really saw him as his hero. And after Nasser died, Gaddafi tried to adopt the mantle of Arab nationalism, but was rejected by a lot of the other Arab leaders. So Nasser's visit to Libya was a very important moment. Here Nasser's telling a joke, it seems. This is one of my favorite series. It shows a young Gaddafi with his shoes off on the beach, reading some documents while surrounded by a group of other revolutionaries. This must be very early on, and they're probably some of the most informal pictures I've seen of Gaddafi. Here's Gaddafi praying by himself on the beach. I mean, any state has massive archives which aren't necessarily open to the public. Sure had a sense of style. If you look at them all together, they really show the evolution of a leader from a young revolutionary who actually had quite a lot of public support to a rambling madman in current days. It also talks a lot about, I think, the cult of personality which evolved around Gaddafi. I think that's why a lot of these early pictures are so touching, because they do appear a lot more spontaneous than a lot of the later pictures. It's George Habash, the head of the PFLP, Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. You know, you never know what you're going to find on these rolls, and suddenly we just came across these pictures of a hanging in the harbor in Benghazi. So we're still trying to figure out what this was actually about. This gives you an idea of how big the archive was, photographing some of the files, but you can see there's this entire room just filled with piles and piles of documents. You know, most of what was collected were files, but they included some very interesting historical documents, such as these intelligence files from the Italian and the British occupation periods. I think it captures some very important moments in Libyan history, including the time of King Idris, and Gaddafi and his glory days, and then the trials. It is very important that they're saved and preserved for future generations, because they allow us a view into a world that we barely can accept exists. And I mean, this is just from one place in Benghazi, and even there most of the files were burned, and you can only imagine what exists in Tripoli and in Sirte and in these many other bigger cities.